Hello and welcome to Professor Pincushion. This tutorial is part of a series for creating a pattern from an existing pair of jeans without having to take it apart. Now your jeans may look a little bit different than mine, but I made sure to choose a pair that had many of the common elements. Now because this breakdown is a little bit more complex than what we've done in the past, we're separating it into 3 different tutorials, but you're in luck because you are watching part number 1. Now, if you haven't done this before, we recommend that you watch our tutorial on how to create patterns from existing clothes, both simple tops and intermediate tops, just so you get the general idea. But if you're ready to tackle jeans, let's go ahead and get started. Let's go over some of the supplies I'm going to be using. First, I have my pattern paper, or just some really large sheets of paper that you can use in order to create your pattern pieces. Tracing paper, this is also going to help us with the pattern pieces. I have several different types of rulers. I have a straight ruler, I have a hip curve. This will help me draw sort of the curvy parts of the pattern. Sewing gauge, tape measure, paper scissors, straight pins, cardboard. Now I just cut this out of a cardboard box to make one long piece for me. I have a pencil and eraser. I'm going to be using markers so it'll be a little bit easier for you to see. I have some fabric markers and some chalk, whatever's going to work best for you. A tracing wheel, and the tracing wheel I'm using is the one that has this sort of spiked wheel. That'll make it a lot easier to see what we're doing. And last but not least, of course, you need your favorite pair of jeans. The first thing you need to do is turn your pants inside out. We're mostly going to be working on the wrong side of the pants in order to create our pattern pieces. Also, I'm going to start with the front leg first. You can see that this is the top of my pants and this is actually a pocket that's in the front. So if we look at the right side, here's my front insert pocket. I'm going to do a little bit of prep work first. So I'm, again, looking at the wrong side. I'm going to grab a fabric marker or a piece of chalk, whatever you want. And there's a couple of lines that I'm going to start to draw that's going to come in handy later, especially for creating the pockets of our pants. The first thing I'm going to draw is going to be the side front. If I flip this over to the right side, the side front is actually this part right here. Let me just pull this out so you can see it. So I'm not worried about this 5th pocket, but this part right here, I want to make sure that I have a pattern piece for that. And I know it's going to seem overwhelming at first, but we're just going to take it one part at a time. If I'm looking at the wrong side, you can just see the bottom outline of that same side front area. And if you can't see it in yours, you can definitely feel it. So I can put my hand inside my pocket and I can feel where that edge is. So I'm just going to use my marker and just kind of just draw an outline of that. Here you can see my blue outline outlining that side front area on the inside of my pocket here. Now I'm not doing it for both sides. I'm only doing it for one leg. I'm not even bothering with this leg over here. So I'm just working on the side where the fly is on top because it lies a little bit flatter, and we only need to do the pattern for one side or one leg anyways, because it's going to be the same basically on both sides. So once I have that outline, the second outline I'm going to do is going to mark the top of the pocket. So again, if we were to look at the right side, it's going to be this section right here. So this is the pocket, or the top of the pocket on the outside. Now this I can't see as easily as with the side front here. I can actually feel where the edge is, or if you're having trouble with that, you can use straight pins and just kind of stick it through, and then you can see where it is, and then you can mark it, and you can just do along the whole thing. So I'm going to do that next, and then we can move on to starting to pin everything down. Here is the second line that I drew to mark the top of that pocket area. Now if you're worried because you try to straighten this out, or you try to iron out the pocket and it's sewn with wrinkles in it, I wouldn't even worry about it. You just try to mark it best you can. We're just going to be using this as guidelines, and we could smooth it out later, so I don't really stress out about it. I'm going to go ahead, grab my cardboard, grab a large sheet of paper that's big enough in order to make a pattern, pin everything into place. Now I have my jeans. The front side is still up because again, we're only working with the front for now. And I'm going to start pinning it into place. You have your pants, and there could be like mine where it has sort of a seam allowance. You have the seam and then you have sort of this finished edge. I'm going to take it and I'm going to fold that edge out. So you have your seam line and then you have the raw edge on the outside. Now, because the back leg tends to be bigger than the front leg, sometimes this back leg is going to be peeking out. You can see on this side. There's no really easy way to get rid of this. You're just going to have to fold it under. Again, taking the seam allowance, folding it out, and we'll get a little bit closer so you can see everything, and then just pinning it. Now you're going to feel wrinkles. It's not going to be completely smooth. You're just going to pin it best you can. Because we have this extra back fabric here, it's just not going to lie perfectly flat. So usually what I do is I start here at the top and I kind of work on this crotch length area, the side pocket area, and then I might work my way down to the bottom of the leg. This leg, you're just going to have to just kind of push it out of the way since we can't get rid of it, and just do the best you can. You can use as many straight pins as you want in order to pin everything down. Usually around this top area, I try to use pins a little bit more sparingly because I don't want too many marks to be confusing when I'm trying to distinguish between all these curves and everything like that. So again, I'm going to start up here, just do the best you can and just pinning everything down. Again, it's just worried about the front leg, and then work your way to the bottom. My pant leg is now pinned into place. I just wanted to show you what it looked like in the top portion here with my crotch curve. So it comes up and then it kind of curves around, and of course the fly gets in the way, but I just kind of keep my pins in the same line as these pins over here. I also have this pin. Now you can see that the seam allowance area is pinned down like I had shown before. And what makes it nice about this is now I don't have to include seam allowance because I already have a 1/2 inch. This is where the seam line is, and then this is the raw edge here. So I'm already allowed a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I can go ahead, draw the outline, and my seam allowance is already included. When it comes to this area up here, there is no seam allowance that's sticking out under. This is the seam line right here. So some areas you will have to remember to add seam allowance up here as well. We're going to have to do that. So let's just look at this. So it's going down the leg, and then we're going to get to the bottom. And because this side seam, the inner leg and outer leg side seam, is sewn into the hem, for me anyways, it's going to curve in. So I just pin as far as I can, and then I pin the bottom of the hem as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my outline, but I'm going to stop right here, draw the end, and then I'm just going to connect it with a straight line. So that way it's going to make it look a little bit neater instead of trying to worry about this area here. Also, this is a great way to think about changes you would like to make to your favorite pair of jeans. Such as for me, maybe it just happens to be an inch longer than I want. So at this point, it'd be a perfect time for me to make it a little bit shorter if I need to. Go ahead and grab your tracing wheel because now we're going to start doing the outline of our pants onto our paper. So the outlines I'm going to do is going to be this outer leg seam line along the hip curve. So I'm going to start here and go all the way down to the bottom of the leg. I'm going to do the inner seam here, starting here, going down to the bottom of the leg. And then I'm also, at the very bottom of the leg, I'm going to mark where the hemline is going to be. So for using the tracing wheel, I normally have to move a little bit slower. I'm just going to follow along the outside of this raw edge here. And instead of just doing one smooth single line, I do like a back and forth motion and just slowly move my way forward. So that way I can make sure that it's actually going to mark my paper. For areas like the crotch curve where our tracing wheel isn't exactly going to go through the fabric and make any marks, I make the marks individually by using just a regular straight pin. So what I do is I start at one end, wherever I'm going to start. I push through the layers of fabric right on that seam line, right on that edge, making sure that it actually punctures through my paper. Then I move it a little bit, push it through, and just keep doing this all the way along. Now, of course, we have this fly getting in the way. So I'm going to go up as far as I can I'm following along the same edge right here, and you can kind of feel where it is as you get to the side of the fly, or you can just lift the bottom of the fly, and then I can kind of see where it is. I'm going to go as far as I can. I can actually feel it up here as well, and if I just take out this pin so we can look at the right side, here is the same seam line. This seam line past this zipper tape is this same line right here. I can kind of feel where that is. So I can go ahead and punch through to my paper. Now I can just end right here and then do a couple of marks up here, and it's going to be a straight line. So I just know that once I remove everything, from my mark I make here to mark here, I'll just draw a straight line connecting these two edges, and that way I don't have to try to go through all of this fly. Next, I'm going to tackle the waistline, and it's going to be the same sort of thing we just did. So we have this edge of the waistband. This is going to be my seam line right here. So I'm going to grab my straight pin. I'm going to go through all layers until I hit the paper. You can see I'm right on the edge there. I'm going to move it along, and just keep going until I get to this area here where it meets the crotch curve. Then I'm going to do the same thing with my two sets of blue lines. So I'm going to take my straight pin, I'm going to go through one section, then I'm going to hit my other blue line. So I'm making those marks. You'll see I have these red stitches right here. What this is marking is the placement of one of my belt loops. So in order to make these marks on my pattern ahead of time, I can go ahead. Either you could do just one single mark, or you can just do a row of marks and then we'll just place an X, because it's going to make a lot easier to make these marks now as we're creating the pattern than to have to come back and figure out where they are. Also, what I'm going to do is do an outline of this pocket facing. Now this happens sometimes with clothes, especially if you've worn them and washed them a lot. It sort of gets kind of distorted looking. So I'm going to make it a little bit neater, and instead of just trying to follow this messed up madness here, maybe I'll just mark where the edge is, and then I'll create my own by drawing a straight line. That way it'll start off looking a lot neater, because this is going to be hard to figure it out as is. Another thing that I'm going to mark is I'm going to mark where the end of this fly hits the front of my pants. So I'm just going to put it through there with my straight pin. Make a big mark if I can, maybe put it through a couple of times, because we always want to make marks so then when we actually put our pants together, we know what we need to line up. So when we're making this side of the pants, we know that this fly, the bottom of it, needs to line up with this mark that we're creating. I always have a notebook that I'm keeping notes. What areas do I need to add seam allowance to? What marks are going to be important? Is this stretchy fabric or not stretchy fabric? How long is the zipper? So whenever you're going through, keep making these notes and keep yourself organized, so it'll make it a lot easier when you try to duplicate your pants. Okay, so once you have everything marked that you think needs to be marked, you can go ahead, start removing your straight pins so we can remove our pants and then reveal our marks. So you can see them starting to come here. So I'm going to go ahead, get these pants off of my paper, and then we'll move on to the next part. All right, so once you're left with your pattern and your marks, it can be a little bit overwhelming. Don't forget, you're also going to have marks from where you actually pinned your pants to the paper. So we're not looking at those, we're just looking at the outline. I went ahead and did my outline in pen, so it'd be a lot easier for you to see where those marks are. And I also put information. This is not a pattern. We still have to add seam allowance, and I put notes here. Crotch curve, I need to add seam allowance. Waistline, I need to add seam allowance. So this is just going to be used as a guideline. Now when I'm following my marks, of course we want it to be as accurate as possible when we made the original marks, but sometimes because of wear and tear and washing all that, your seam lines may be somewhat distorted. So be accurate as possible, but at the same time, you need to use common sense. I know for me, when I'm trying to do my tracing wheel, it's not going to end up perfectly straight, but maybe it just kind of wiggles around a little bit, so it's not going to look that great. So that's why I grab my straight ruler, I grab my hip curve, and I use these to help guide what my line's going to look like. So if they kind of look like they're in a straight line, then I use my ruler and I draw a straight line, or I do the same thing with my hip curve area over here. So I use my hip curve in order to draw a neater looking hip curve, using my marks as just my guideline. So once I have my outline done, and you can see I went ahead and did these outlines in a different color, because from this one area, we're actually creating separate patterns. You have the pants front, you have the pocket facing, you have the side front, but I'm going to keep them together for now, because once we create the jeans back, I need to match up this side curve here, the hip curve, and make sure they're both the same. So whatever adjustment I can make, I can do it at the same time when I'm creating all these patterns, instead of having 3 different patterns that I'm going to have to adjust. I know it seems like a lot, it sounds confusing, but it's going to all work out and you'll see how it works out. Other things I add is maybe I go ahead and add my notches. I have some notches here and here. These are just make it easier from when I'm putting all these pattern pieces or fabric pieces back together. It makes it a lot easier to match. So once you have your outline, what we're going to move on to next is creating our pattern pieces for our fly area. If you flip your pants right side out and look at the left side of the zipper area, you're going to see 2 sets of stitching lines. This is for sewing in our zipper, and we need to transfer these stitching lines to this crotch curve area. So for this section, I do have my pants right side out, and I'm just looking at this side, which is the left side of the fly, because it doesn't have it on the other side. I'm going to match the edge of the pants with this line here, because this is the seam line. And this section up here, the seam line between the pants and the waistband, is going to match with this line right here. So I'm just going to line it up best I can, pin it into place. And I know this part gets a little tricky because you have your zipper in the way, but you're just going to do the best you can. And then just like with the technique I showed before, you're going to grab a straight pin and you're just going to go through the actual stitching lines to mark them, so then we can draw our own dashed line onto our outline here. Here you can see my stitching lines in the purple, and then I put left side stitching lines, so I know that I need to transfer these to my left front leg once I cut it out of my fabric. Let's look again at the inside of the pants. So over here we have the right fly, and then if we look at the other side, this is the fly facing. So we need to create a pattern for both the fly facing and then for the right fly. So we'll start with this one, because actually this one is really easy. If you look at this, at least with mine, really what it is, it's a rectangle. So instead of putting this on my paper and putting pins through it and all that kind of stuff, all I'm going to do is measure it. So I'm just going to grab my sewing gauge here and try to straighten that out. And it's about 3 3/4 in length. Plus I'm going to go ahead and add seam allowance. So I'm going to add a 1/2 inch up here and then a 1/2 inch on the bottom, because it looks like it's tucked in inside about a 1/2 inch, so it looks more finished down here. So that's going to be, so it was 3 3/4 plus an inch for seam allowance. So that's 4 3/4 in length. And then I'm going to measure the width. And this is 1 3/4. But if we look at it, you'll see it's folded. So this piece is basically folded in half. The seam allowance is already, here's the seam line, and then here's the seam allowance here. So it's already included in that 1 3/4. So then I'm just going to double that, and that's 3.5 inches. So I'm just going to create a rectangle that's 4 3/4 by 3.5 inches. And voila, here it is. So again, just a rectangle. I put right fly, and then that's my pattern piece for that. Next, I'm going to tackle the fly facing. So that's this piece right here. The zipper tape is on top of it, but it's from here to here. And you can see that it's just a single layer of fabric that kind of just curves down here underneath our right fly. So to start it off, I have a small piece of paper. I'm just going to draw a straight line just to have something to start off with and to give me something to line up. So I'm going to line up the edge of my pants with the edge of this line and pin it into place. I'm just going to pin it as far down as I can go. It's a little difficult because the zipper and the rest of the fly does get in the way, but you can do it. And then, just like I did before, I'm just going to take my straight pin, I'm going to follow along with the edge, the raw edge of this facing piece. And as you get down to the bottom, you will have to try to pull the right fly out of the way and just go as far as you can go. Also, I'm going to do it along the top of the waistline here because this is part of it as well. And so it'll have three sides. We have the straight side, the waistline, and then this outward curve here. And I actually already created my pattern. So the dashed line is the original line, and then here's the curve here. Because it's on the waistline, I need to add the 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then the fly facing is stitched onto the pants. So there's actually a seam here. So I went ahead and added another 1/2 inch seam allowance on this side too. So this is already my pattern for the fly facing. New tutorials are released weekly, so please subscribe to be notified of the next release. Make sure to check out our other videos and visit ProfessorPincushion.com to view our complete library with well over 200 sewing video tutorials, including our exclusive premium content. Our premium membership is only $5 a month for unlimited access and only available at ProfessorPincushion.com. Also, don't forget to download our mobile app for videos on the go. Thanks for watching.